Okay, perfect. So we're all set. So hi, everybody. Welcome to our Workshop Wednesdays as part of PAC's weekly calendar of events. We'd like to welcome you to our events and programs, and we hope you and your family are doing well and staying healthy. Thank you for joining our session today for our ADC Civic Engagement webinar. And stick around to the end where we will be having a short presentation about the census, and you can have a chance to enter for an Amazon gift card raffle. So stay tuned till the end. Today we're going to go into talking with ADC about how to be involved in civic engagement with your community. And I'm really excited to have you guys. So thank you so much. And the floor is yours.
Oh, well,
Thank you.
thank you, Tala. I guess I'll start it real quick. For those who don't know me, my name is Urick Elif. I'm by trade a lawyer, but I also serve as the national president for the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. I'm also originally from New Jersey. So, but currently I'm talking to you from Washington, D.C. Things a little safer here. And I wish all you guys safety up there. Just as a background, the ADC was founded in 1980 by U.S. Senator James Abourezk. Senator Abourezk was the first U.S. Senator of Arab descent. And we were founded in 1980. We are the largest and oldest national grassroots civil rights organization for Arabs and Arab Americans. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to talk to you sort of about how to get involved in campaigns and elections and why they're important. And then I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Janan, who will talk to you about what to do after they're elected, sort of how to keep in touch with them and how to make sure that your voices are heard. But first, the most important thing is to talk about is how to get people who think like you and have the same values as you, how to get them elected. And what I talk about essentially is working on campaigns, not just on a federal level. It's important that we elect a president and a senator and a congressman, but it's just as important to work on local campaigns. Because what people don't understand is that it's the local elected officials that have the biggest impact on your day-to-day life. So your congressman has a sort of a big picture impact, but it's your Board of Ed member who decides what's being taught in the schools and taught to your children. It's your city councilman and your mayors who are decided, what's going on in your local town or your local vicinity, your freeholders and what is going on in your county. So they'll have a bigger impact on your day-to-day life. And quite honestly, with the local elections, a little goes a long way. Remember, when you're dealing with a Congress and a governor or even a federal senator, there's a lot more people involved. A lot more things are involved. So it's harder to sort of get known or get recognized when the election is that big. To get involved with an election, there are three basic ways you can get involved with an election. One, and the most important way, is voting. It's the basic, logical way of how we elect our people. It is important that you register to vote and that you actually vote, because people do the registration, but they don't do the second part and actually go and vote. So with that, I want to talk about certain deadlines in New Jersey that are very important, because you miss the deadlines, you're not voting. In New Jersey, you have the primary election, which as of now is set for June 2nd. The deadline to register to vote for that is May 12th. Now, in New Jersey, you have the ability to ask for an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot. And in New Jersey, you don't have to give them a reason. You just ask for it and they have to give it to you. So in this new reality of COVID, it's important that you consider applying for an absentee ballot and a mail-in ballot. The deadline to ask for a ballot by mail is May 26th for the primaries, and to ask for it in person on June 1st. Those ballots must be returned and postmarked no later than June 2nd. The general election is May 30th. The deadline for that is October 13th. You must register by October 13th or you cannot vote in the general election. Now, you only have to register once. So if you already registered 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and you've been voting, you're fine. But if you haven't voted or you haven't voted in 5 or 6 years, it's important to re-register just in case. Again, for absentee ballots for the general election, you must request them by mail by October 27th, and they must be postmarked no later than November 3rd and received by November 5th. So that's very important. To get registrations or mail-in ballots, all you have to do is go to your county board of elections, and you can usually find where they're located on the internet. Now, I can't stress. Everybody says, "Well, does my vote count? Does my vote count?" Remember this: Donald Trump won the presidency with 45% of the vote, but only 45% of the eligible voters actually voted that election. So in reality, Trump was only won the election by getting about 25% or 30% of the entire voting public. That's how he was able to win. He won with a total of 70,000 votes in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. So that shows you that small votes either way can make the difference. Now it's important, again, as I said, the first way you can do is by voting. But it's important that whatever you do, that the campaign knows what you're doing. They know that this is Nabil, and Nabil not only voted for us, but he's done all these other things for us. So they get to know you. If they know you, they not only respect you, but they will rely on you. So that when you have something to say, they know, oh, this is Nabil. He's been very helpful for us. He's somebody we need to listen to. So again, when you vote, nobody knows that you vote, who you voted for, right? Because everything is secret. But what you can do is you can go to a campaign and say, look, I want to support your candidate. Give me a sign to put out in front of my home. And they'll deliver a sign to you. Or I want a sign to be put in a window, okay? That way they know that you support them. The second way you can be helpful is to volunteer. What I mean by volunteer is essentially getting other people to vote for the candidates. So again, you would go into a campaign, you said, hey, my name is Nabil Samer. I like what your candidate stands for. I would like to help him or her become elected. So they may ask you to, one, maybe give you material, say, okay, go to your neighborhood, knock on doors, and hand them out, hand pamphlets, and talk to them, and help spread the news. They may ask you to come in and do a phone banking. We used to, when I was working in New Jersey doing elections, we used to do phone banking in Arabic. So we helped various governors and state senators by calling Arab Americans in Arabic, and we asked them to vote and support our candidate. Again, you're just a matter of going in and saying, I want to help, can go a long way, and they get to know you. Third important way is by donating money. Let's face it, campaigns run on volunteers and they run on money. They need campaign contributions. And when I say campaign contributions, I'm not talking about thousands of dollars. You remember, Bernie Sanders built his campaign on $5 donations. Again, here is where local campaigns matter most. This is where you get the bigger bang for your buck. If you give somebody who's running for Board of Ed, if you give them $10, that means a lot more than somebody who's running for president or Congress. Okay? So they understand. You give them $100, you give them $5, you give them $10. That helps. But what you can also do is you can do what's called bundling. You can go around to your family and friends, say, look, I support this guy, help me out. Make a $10 donation, make a $20 donation, make a $20, whatever you want to make. Bundle those checks, go into the campaign, say, look, this is from me and my community, and we're supporting your candidate. Again, bringing the community together, but knowing that they know that it's coming from you or it's coming from the community. You could hold parties where you invite either the candidate themselves or one of their staff members to come in and to talk to a gathering of your family and friends, whether you ask them for money or whether it's just informational. Again, whatever you can do to bring them to the community, to bring them to people, to give them the opportunity of making the case is very important. And by doing this, you're proving to them who you are, what you are, and that you're somebody to be trusted to and to be admired. And the thing is, what's also important here is not necessarily that you're establishing a rapport or a relationship with the candidate, because that's important. But it's also just as important is to establish that relationship with the operatives, the paid staff members who are working on that campaign, because those members will go on to other campaigns and work with other campaigns. So if you can establish a relationship with them, it's also important because they, when they move on to a different campaign, they'll know you. They'll understand who you are. And they'll remember you, and they'll say, oh, this is somebody we need to listen to, and it's somebody we need to get involved with, and somebody that we know we can rely on. And once you gain that credibility, it really helps. Now, I want to say this, and I go back to this early issue, is that, again, we all want to work with the congressmen or work with the senators or with the governors, but it's important that we work with these individuals before they get to Congress. That's where you establish your relationship. So I'll give you an example. Everybody knows Congressman Pasquarello from New Jersey. Well, Congressman Pasquarello started out as a Board of Ed member. From there, he became a city councilman. Then he became a mayor. He became a state legislature, and he eventually became a congressperson. Okay? So an individual like that, if you're able to help them out while they are a Board of Ed member or a city councilman, when they see the circle around them is smaller, and they learn to rely on you at an earlier time, again, when they do become the congressman or the senator or the governor, they'll know you, and they'll be thankful for you because they will know that you helped them out when they needed it more. So again, that's sort of the important aspect, is to understand, yes, it's not about it's about the thrill of helping a congressman or a senator, but it's the smaller people that have the biggest impact on your daily lives. But those are the people that go on to become congressmen, that go on to become the governors and the senators. And that's where you can have a big impact on them. I just want to make sure that I've sort of covered. With the campaign contributions, there are some campaign contribution limits that you have to be aware of. In New Jersey, you cannot give more than $2,700 per campaign, per election. And for the federal level, you cannot give more than $2,800 per person per campaign per election cycle. And I think that's all on my part. I tried to go through this as quickly as possible because I want to leave enough time for Janan, and I want to leave enough time for questions and answers. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Janan. If you want to please introduce yourself and go.
All right. Thank you, Samir. And thank you, PAC, for having us. This is extremely important, and we're trying to do everything that we can to make sure our communities are staying engaged while being in isolation and working from home. And so this is obviously a very good way for us to be able to do this. So I'm the national organizer for ADC, and I've been involved in nonprofit and civic engagement work for a very long time. I was very involved at the college level, and moving on throughout my career, I was always very involved specifically in local elections. As Samir said, that's always extremely important, and I've always emphasized the fact that it is more important to be involved with your local politics because they directly impact you compared to caring only about voting for president maybe once every 4 years. And so I've always had that mentality and have trained our communities in order to understand that. So what I'm going to talk about is engaging with our members of Congress and the best ways to do that. And so I'm going to share my screen. I created just a very short PowerPoint, just a few slides to show some different things. I'm a visual person. I've done trainings for a long time, so I know that people like to look at things more so than just hear somebody speak. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And then that I'll just need you to let me know if it's available for everyone to see. Okay. So do you see that?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. All right. So, so obviously reaching out to your members of Congress is extremely important for a number of reasons. One, hopefully you voted for them, so you know exactly what it is that they stand for and the types of issues that they work on. and whether or not it impacts your community. And so once they're elected, it is your civic duty to be able to reach out to them and to give them feedback on things that have been happening on the Hill. For instance, right now, obviously, we're going through a crisis, and there were multiple versions of the CARES Act and the stimulus checks that were going to be going out to all of the impacted people. And so knowing how your representative is voting on this, whether or not they're supporting billions of dollars for large corporations over giving support for small businesses and nonprofit organizations in your community is a big deal. And so knowing how they're voting should be important to you, because that person is directly representing you and they're making decisions on your behalf and the behalf of your community. And so what you want to do is you want to be able to hold them accountable or to celebrate their decisions depending on what they're doing. There's a lot of different ways that you can reach out to them. Obviously, you can call the U.S. Capitol Switchboard, and they will connect you to whatever district you're in and connect you to your representative or your senator. And then you can go onto their individual websites as well. And I have both websites listed here, but you can just go online and just, if you need to, Google, contact U.S. representatives, and it'll pop up for you to click on the link. I think it's important that people realize the need for the Arab community, the Arab American community, to voice their praise or their displeasure to their representatives, because they need to know that there's a lot of issues out there that are affecting the Arab American community. And I know specifically Palestine is an issue that comes up a lot in terms of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, as well as different things like Palestinian aid and the amount of aid that has been cut off from Palestine. And so these are things that really should matter to us because they directly impact us and our community and our families overseas. And so you want to make sure that you reach out to your representative or your senator, depending on how they voted, and let them know, hey, I didn't really like, what you said. I think maybe, if you work with us in our organization, we can give you some good talking points on the floor, and a lot of them are very receptive to that. Or you could say, hey, thank you for voting for that bill because it's important to our community, and, this will help us, have faith in voting for you for another term. As Sam had said, when you are donating and bringing checks and money to these candidates when they're running for office, they see the impact of your vote in dollar signs. And obviously to them, that's what matters because they want to get reelected. That's always their goal. So within 6 months, let's say for the House of Representatives, they have to start campaigning again because they are reelected every 2 years. Senators are elected every 6 years, so they have a little bit more time. So you want to make sure that you're keeping track of that and knowing who is running and when. And if you see a candidate that's representing you that you do not like, that is not voting the way that you want them to vote, that has views that are directly impacting and harming your community, you want to make sure that you find an opponent to run against them that's actually going to, make an impact and represent you the way you want to be represented. Another way that you guys can make sure to connect with your representatives is ADC frequently sends out action alerts. If you sign up for our newsletter on adc.org, you can receive these through email. And what it is, usually we'll thank a representative or a senator for something that they have done that has been helpful to our community. And all you have to do, you click on the link, you enter in your information, and it automatically sends a letter to that office thanking them or asking them for whatever the action requires. So that's a very easy way without you having to do too much work to be able to actually represent your community and make an impact on what they're doing on Capitol Hill on your behalf. So I know a lot of us are really big on social media, and this is something that I've learned in the last 2 years after doing a media training here in Washington, D.C. And having a really good social media strategy and knowing how to interact with different types of people on social media can also create a very important impact on whether or not they are listening to your community or whether or not they actually care about what your community is saying about them. So on Twitter, our Congress members are constantly tweeting. So right now with everything going on, they're tweeting about what's going on, and they're tweeting about the CARES Act, and they're tweeting about impacted communities across the country, things that they themselves are introducing in order to provide support for the American people. And so it's very easy for you to be able to quote tweet or to reply to your representative or your senator saying thank you for, you know, including immigrants in the next stimulus bill, or thank you for remembering undocumented workers, or thank you for realizing that people in like the Detroit area tend to have a higher rate of deaths, and you're recognizing that and you want to do something to change that. So it's also very good to make sure that you are thanking them as much as you are criticizing them. If you're constantly criticizing your members, really they're just not going to see any benefit coming from you or your community. So thanking them is also very important. Now, if they share a tweet from one of our members in the community, an activist such as Linda Sarsour or Amir Zahar or Professor Hatem Bazian, it's also good to thank them, retweet it, and let them know like, hey, you know, I appreciate it, Senator so-and-so, or thank you, Representative so-and-so, for, you know, retweeting this important message from someone from my community that means a lot to me because ABC. You could talk about your personal impact and why it's important that, you know, they're retweeting something about providing aid to Palestine. I have family that still lives there. You know, this is like, you know, my grandparents' homeland, and it's still very important to me and my family. There's so many different things that you could say. If they offer support for a local event that you're putting on, obviously that is something that you would want to thank them for. So that really goes without saying. And then obviously you also want to, you know, give them those critiques. So if they are voting against the bill that you favor, or voting for a bill that you don't favor, such as the BDS movement bill that came out last year, and the senators voted for the anti-BDS stipulations, meaning like people would be punished for supporting the BDS movement. That is something that you would obviously want to reach out because it's directly impacting your community. But above that, it's also impacting you as an American and your freedom of speech. ADC works really hard on the on-campus Palestinian activism movement to make sure that we are part of the conversations happening along with other groups to make sure that, you know, we continue to retain that freedom of speech to be able to speak about our history and our struggles as Palestinians. When your representative or any, you know, representative retweets or posts something that is harmful or damaging to your community, let's say it's an article from a right-wing news site, it's a video that clearly has been photoshopped or showing our community in a damaging or harmful way, it is important to hold them accountable to that and to make sure that they understand that what they did is not right. And obviously, the more people that are doing this, the more they should realize what mistake they made, and they should retract it. And I've seen it time and time again that when you call out a lot of these representatives and you hold them accountable for the misinformation that they're spreading, they will retract it immediately most of the time because they don't want their image to be tarnished. And especially if it's an election season, they know that they will lose votes because a lot of times the things that they are posting are not just impacting one community, let's say the Arab or the Muslim or the Black community. It tends to be very xenophobic, very racist overall, and it's going to affect a lot of different communities from marginalized backgrounds who are going to see that it's a problem and will probably not vote for that person. So that is my take on the social media strategy. And the last slide, obviously the best thing that you can do once we're out of isolation is to attend Advocacy Days. So there's multiple organizations that put on advocacy days that are for the Arab American community. There's a couple of photos on here that I pulled from Palestine Advocacy Day with the American Muslims for Palestine, which is an event that I've helped organize for the last 3 years, and it's obviously very important to our community. And you know, we work on the issues that are directly impacting us in the moment. And so you have that, and then you also have other advocacy days with different organizations like the Arab American Institute, CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and obviously being able to go and physically meet with the offices of your representatives is very impactful, and having higher numbers turn out will show them that our communities matter and that we do care about a lot of the things that they are working on the Hill. And I want to make sure that people understand that the relationship that you have with the staff of the offices is just as, if not more important than the relationship with the member themselves. A lot of times you will not be able to meet directly with your representative. They're always in meetings, they're traveling, they're on the floor voting. And so most of the time you will be given a meeting with the actual staff member, whether it's the chief of staff, the legislative aide, national security advisor, whoever it may be. We should be happy with those because those are also just as important because people need to be able to relay the information to the member themselves. So if they're not available, it's definitely okay. You're able to still get your point across and get people to pass along your information. And so that's one thing that I wanted to make sure to point out before I ended my my part of the presentation. But I will say this in closing is that when I started working with AMP, American Muslims for Palestine, and we went on the Hill, we had about 250 people a couple of years ago. And we had members and offices tell us that they have never had people come onto the Hill to discuss Palestinian issues. This was the first time they'd ever really heard from a group talking about the rights of Palestinians and the need to make sure that we continue to give aid to the Palestinians. And I think that's very impactful and very powerful because there's always other types of groups on Capitol Hill that are advocating for their cause. So we have just as right as anyone else, if not more so, to go on the Hill and to meet with and to discuss these issues with our elected officials. So I'll leave it there.
If I can just add just a couple things that I think are just as important. While it's very important for you to go to DC, to go to the Capitol Hill, also understand that all members have offices in their district, and also they will take meetings in the district. So when I was in New Jersey, sometimes we would go to the local New Jersey office of Congressman Pasquarello or whatever congressman you want to go to, and you can actually hold the meeting in New Jersey. So you don't have to make a special trip to DC to do this. At the same time, you can also meet with staffers here in New Jersey. And again, it's important. And it goes back to what I told you earlier about establishing the relationship with the campaign people, because those campaign people in all likelihood will become staffers themselves and work with that person once they get elected. So again, if they know you, you'll have an easy in. You might have their personal cell number. You can reach out to them. Second thing is when you go to these meetings, take something that you can leave, an article, anything you can leave with them, so that they're not just taking their notes. So sometimes we like to leave sort of articles on a specific subject, or we'll put together our own one-pager on an issue, and we'll leave that back with them. The third thing and the last thing I want to leave with is this issue of tone. When you do contact your member of Congress or their staffer, understand your tone. I know as Arabs, when we debate, we kind of debate very, loud, because we think, I guess, the loudest person is going to win the debate, or we kind of tend to get into people's faces. That doesn't go over well with these people. So again, when you are criticizing them, understand your tone, do so in a respectful manner and say, listen, I'm your constituent. I voted for you, or whatever you want to say, and this is what you did, and I think you're wrong, and here's why I think you're wrong. Or give a personal example. This is what happened to me in Palestine. You know, my family was kicked out of Palestine. Or this is what's happening to my cousin who's now living in Jerusalem, or whatever. So you got to leave those personal touches and understand that you're having a conversation, not an argument or a debate. So I kind of, with that, I guess if you'd like, Tala, we can open it up, or however you want to go forward with.
I guess we can start by opening up the floor for questions. So if you guys have any specific questions, feel free to send them in the chat box, or speak up. It's fine. I actually did have a question, Simon, about something you said about the
Okay.
total. So you said you can give up to 2,700 in NJ for a candidate per cycle. Does that mean I mean, I don't know why anyone.
Per election.
Per election, yeah. I don't know why anyone would want to do this, but would it be possible to give to more than one candidate? Above
Yes.
that? Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah. No, that's per candidate, per election.
Per candidate, okay.
Per election. So if you have the means, please go ahead and do it.
All right. I mean, I'm just curious.
Yes. You can give to each Congress candidate $2,700. Excuse me, to a federal candidate $2,800. But
Right.
you can give $2,700 to one state senator, $2,700 to another state senator,
Okay.
and it's per person. So if it's a husband and wife, each one of them can give $2,700.
Okay, very good. Thank
Just
you.
because you get married doesn't mean you lose your constitutional rights. So there you go.
Cool, good to know. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, so I want to thank you guys again for
Wait, one second,
out.
sorry.
Yeah, Barry?
I was typing it, but so what would be the approach? So I know that contacting government officials directly is important, but is there an approach towards engaging, say, companies that or organizations that, because they're the ones that really influence the politicians the most? That's why I think, like the big names that like they give the campaign contributions. So has there ever been an approach towards them, like engaging those big name corporations?
So I'm assuming you mean like the lobbyists for those big groups, because they're the ones that are usually meeting with the representatives.
Yeah, lobbyists, yeah.
Well, I mean, the lobbyists are going to be paid by either organizations, or they're going to be paid by corporations. So let's give an example: the NRA. The NRA is one of the strongest lobbying organizations there are. And quite honestly, who is the NRA? Well, the NRA is a membership organization, but the NRA is basically run by the gun manufacturers. So the NRA, they're dictated to by the gun manufacturers. So you can go directly to corporations and say, hey, look, I don't like your stance that you're taking on this issue, and I'm a consumer. I think you need to change. Now, how's that going to be taken by $1 billion conglomerate? I don't know. The question is, do you maybe put together a boycott? And I know some boycotts have been successful with certain campaigns where, hey, listen, these X amount of people are not going to buy your product because of a position you've taken on this. We see that happening a lot more with sort of these commentators that have said, some really nasty stuff, where boycotts have happened, and because of the boycotts, they've been taken off the air. I mean, I haven't heard of a successful campaign regarding going after a corporation for their sort of campaign contributions. Janan, I don't know if you...
So I wouldn't say like the large I wouldn't say necessarily large corporations in essence, but when I worked at CARE, there was a report that was published that you can find online on their website called Hijacked by Hate. But they researched and found all the different philanthropies and the large foundations that actually take donations from individuals and then anonymously give those checks to organizations. So like, what's that one that's for investments? I can't even remember. Fidelity. So for instance, like if I have stocks in Fidelity, I can take money out and then I can have them donate it to any nonprofit that I choose, but they donate it anonymously. It's just a check that they receive and my name is not on it. So you had all of this money, almost like hundreds of millions of dollars that was being funneled through these types of foundations that was going to all these right-wing, xenophobic, like, you know, anti-Black organizations. And they were making so much money off of these donations. And so once the report was published by CARE, a lot of these foundations didn't realize where the money was going. They didn't realize a lot of these groups were hate groups, and they actually stopped accepting donations going to those groups. Because if you think about it, a lot of people are trying to donate anonymously because they don't want to be labeled or doxxed, I guess, for making a donation to a hate group. But once that funnel was cut off from them, they don't have a choice now. If they want to make a donation, they'd have to make it directly. So that's the only instance that I've ever seen where like these large type corporations, but they're really not corporations, have been, in a sense, like their source of funding has been cut off.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. So thank you guys so much for your presentation. It was very, very educational, and it's definitely needed. And I only wish that more people could benefit from this. So specifically when it comes to Palestine, I heard that actually the approach, rather than making it personal, is better to kind of identify it more with your American identity. You know, for example, like the whole BDS thing, talking more about free speech than it is about, like, you know, the realities of your family overseas. So I wanted to know if you could speak a little bit more about that and from your own experience.
So I will say that when we've advocated, and BDS is usually on the agenda for American Muslims for Palestine's Advocacy Day, because obviously that's something that's we've been fighting this for a while now, and a lot of civil rights groups will fight it as the right to free speech, because as a civil rights group, we are preserving the civil rights of our, you know, American constituents and our members, like at ADC or at CARE. But I will say though that when you actually sit in an office with a member or their staff, and I've done this when I worked at a Syrian nonprofit, speaking on a personal note is actually more effective, because it's good to be able to give them a sense of humanity when it comes to that issue. So when you talk about BDS, you can speak as an American and say, as an American, this infringes on my freedom of speech, and it's the First Amendment right to be able to protest. On the other hand, as a first generation, like for me specifically, my parents came from Palestine, I would say this impacts me on a deeper level because I still have family that lives overseas under occupation, and I still hear from them every single day about how that occupation is affecting their lives and their freedom, and it's a very personal issue to me, and they will be receptive to that. Now, I will say you definitely don't want to get overly emotional and start yelling and crying and screaming. You want to say it and you want to present it in a very, like, you know, rational, logical way, but you still want to bring an element of your personal story into that, because that's really what differentiates you from a lot of the other people that come through their office. It's those individualized stories.
Yeah, look, and I think both approaches work, and I think both approaches have to be done. So, for example, when we used to go in and have a sit-down meeting with the member of Congress or with their staff, and there'll be about 3 or 4 or 5 of us who went, we had a strategy session before we went, and we came up with a strategy. So, okay, you this is what you're going to talk about. person 2, this is what you're going to talk about, person 3. And so one person would give their personal, the personal approach. Listen, this is what I saw with my eyes. This is what my family's going through, and sort of give it that personal approach. But secondly, and what's also important is that we talk about, why is this important to American interests? Why does this help America? So, for example, when you talk about the aid going to Israel, you could say, well, why are we giving this much money to the aid to Israel when we have people in this country that are backed up with student loan debts, when we could pay for people to go to college, where people don't have health care, where people don't have, where we're spending more money on Palestine, on Israel, than we are on, food stamps or on this or on that. Or you can talk about how this is not in the best interest of the United States if we continue to 100% blindly support Israel. Why? This is why. Because remember, at the end of the day, they're also members of the United States Congress. So they want to know, what is it in the best interest of the United States? So I would say, again, that both is important, and both need to be fleshed out at a meeting, because you're going to have that on both sides, and I think both will hit home.
Thank you very much. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's, I think, focusing more on strategy than anything else.
Exactly.
And hitting all areas.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from anybody? Okay. So usually at this point, I would play a census video and have people fill out a survey, but I kind of want to do things a little differently, because I think we can actually talk about the census in the scope of this discussion.
Sure.
I don't think we need to play the video. So if you guys have anything that you would like to say about the census, I'm just going to do the basic rundown of how important political representation is, and we're seeing that now more than ever during this crisis, and how the census directly affects congressional representation and federal funding. So if you guys have anything that you might want to add in terms of the census and civic engagement that you know off the top of your head, feel free.
Well, I just want to add this. It was just announced by the census that they're pushing back the deadline date to do the census. It's going to be October 1st now. So we'll have enough time. People have enough time with the COVID to fill it out. They're also pushing back a lot of other deadlines, and because of it. And the census is extremely, 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 extremely important. I can't emphasize enough how basically this entire country always relies on the census to do districting, to do funding, to do a whole kinds of different things. So I think it's very important that you do the census, and that you do it by either internet or by phone. And if you don't do it by internet or phone, somebody will be coming knocking at your door. Okay, so if you don't want that person to come knocking at your door, pick up the phone or do it by email.
Yes, they're also sending out the paper forms to any house that hasn't responded yet via the self-response options. So you can always do the traditional snail mail, but I think personally what I did was the internet option. It was super easy, and I'm just trying to make sure that everybody knows how important it is in terms of congressional representation. In the last census, we lost a seat here in New Jersey, but it's not because of any reason other than people just weren't responding to the census.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our population didn't decline. It wasn't anything like that. It was just lack of response. So it's super, super, super important, especially in times of crisis now. It's illuminated how representation affects responses to situations. It doesn't matter who you're politically aligned with, but it's clear now that between Cuomo and Trump, two different ideologies and two different approaches to combating this pandemic in the US. And if you feel very strongly about whichever one, and you prefer how one person is handling it over the other, super important to complete your census, because that's your representation, that's your voice. And if you want to see more leaders with your ideologies, make sure you complete your census so that there's more area for representation. So I've also shared the link in the chat for the survey for the census. If you fill that out, you'll be entered into a raffle to win an Amazon gift card. We do it monthly, 3 winners, so we have not picked April yet. So good luck, guys. And Thank you so much. Again, I really learned a lot on a personal level, so I'm really glad, and I hope everyone who participated learned a lot. And stay safe in DC, guys.
You too.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I guess I'm gonna stop the live stream and then I'll end the meeting.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.